Katie from Nerd Church here. It's April 21st, and 1 year ago, April 21st was Easter Monday. And Pope Francis died. And nobody really expected that. Well, I mean, we all expected that because he was sick and had been really sick for months. Like, nobody who had ever seen an elderly relative really expected him to last very much longer. But, yeah, I mean, when you like a pope, he's kind of like your grandpa. And for me, he was really like my grandpa because he was like 3 months younger than my actual grandma, who had died the year before. And that was really tough for me. And then Francis died, and that was really tough for me. But I was undergoing chemo. Remember, everything I do or say is inspirational. I don't make the rules, I just enjoy them. I was on chemo, and I had, this period of formal mourning for Francis where I had time and the luxury and the rare privilege of just being able to wallow in my grief. And, the whole world was kind of sad at the same time. So, I was crying for my grandma and Francis and myself and everything, and just everything that I was kind of worried and scared about, because okay, Leo is my pope. Ride or die, Leo is my pope. Francis is the one who gave me back my faith in God. Or no, not really. He didn't give me back my faith in God. He gave me back my faith in the Catholic Church. And he gave me back my faith that maybe, God and the Catholic Church are not necessarily on opposite sides of many important issues of our day. And that happened. I've talked about, yes, I was born in the year of the three popes, or rather the year before the year of the three popes, which is, the cool way of saying 1977. But it also means that the only pope that I ever really remembered is John Paul II. And I forget, I sometimes forget exactly how old I was when John Paul died and exactly what year that was, because I had a lot of stuff going on in my life, and I was deliberately not paying that close of attention to the Catholic Church at that time. But John Paul became Pope when I was a year old, and I was a grown woman with a college degree and 2 kids, or as close to 2 kids as would make no difference, when he died. So it was kind of like this eternal papacy, and we all knew there were problems. We all, the Catholic Church started hemorrhaging people in the 80s for all kinds of reasons. And then we got Benedict, who was a continuation of John Paul. Benedict was a continuation of what a lot of people didn't like about John Paul, without John Paul's charisma or John Paul's pastoral presence. And, honestly, I've read some of the other stuff he's written. I've read the entire brick of the catechism of the 83 catechism that Benedict wrote. Benedict was a really good theologian, and he really understood God. He just didn't understand people. Because, he had his dad, and he had his mom, and he had his brother, and that was all he really needed on earth. And that was really all he needed on heaven, because like he had God who was his brother, and he had the Holy Spirit who was his like best friend he could talk to all the time, and he had Jesus who was his brother, and his mom and Mary, and his mom and Jesus's mom were both chilling out in heaven. And that was all he needed. So he didn't understand people because he didn't feel like he needed to. Because, well, he was kind of a nerdy little kid who had a rough childhood and grew up in books. And I can't hate someone like that. But I can say that Benedict should never have been Pope. And so for, I don't know, the first, like, let's call it 30 years of my life, I thought I knew the story. The Catholic Church was going to fade and shrink and become irrelevant. And in 100 years, 200 years, 500 years, it was going to be a footnote that we would talk about in the same breath as like Zoroastrianism. Yes, they're still around. Yes, they exist. Yes, they're worth talking to and talking about and learning about. They have beautiful scriptures. They left some beautiful buildings. But at the end of the day, there aren't that many of them. And the most famous one you know is Freddie Mercury. And you may or may not have known he was a Zoroastrian. That was going to be the Catholic Church. And maybe that was never true, but if you were a kid in the 80s and 90s, if you were a girl in the 80s and 90s who had to sit there and hear about how abortion and divorce were the worst sins in the world, and how your bad behavior could result in death and mayhem and murder, it was really hard to believe that it was going to be different. And then we got Francis. And he said, todos, todos, todos. And he said, who am I to judge? And, you know, maybe sometimes the way he phrased things wasn't the greatest, but he also sat across the table from trans activists and, like, addressed them by their chosen name and their proper pronouns. And if you go over to Max Kuzma's channel, you will see, which you should, if you're not on Max Kuzma's channel and you're subscribed to Nerd Church, just go over there. What are you even doing with your life? It's Max, Max Kuzma. Okay, brilliant guy. He's trans. He told that to Francis, and Francis gave him a hug and asked him to pray for him. That was who Francis was. That's who Francis is. And, you know, they haven't started the canonization process. They might. I don't know. Francis had a really bad temper. But today I prayed for his soul, whether he needs it or not, and I told him, you know, if he doesn't need me to pray for his soul, maybe it can just go to somebody who does need it. It's up to him. He's the Pope. I trust him. But that's the point, is that there's still this love, there's still this relationship, and I know that sounds abnormal, but that's what's going on. But then Francis gave us Leo. And I'll talk about that in another video. But that's the point. Francis gave us Leo, and there's a lot of people who went into the Leo papacy inclined to trust Leo because Francis had made him a cardinal. Francis put him in charge of, made him the guy who was in charge of picking bishops. He trusted him to promote the next generation of leaders in the church. So we trusted Leo, and we like Leo. And I think that we've gotten our money's worth on Leo. Like, I feel like Leo's been good for the church. This week, we're going to be talking about people who love Leo. Next week, I'm going to be talking about people who hate Leo. But today, I just want to talk about Francis. Or rather, this video, I just want to talk about Francis. Because, you know what? He gave the Catholic Church its future back. Because he came down on the whole PDF file issue like The Wrath of God, and he did it without going hard homophobic. That's tough. He did it. He started welcoming people back, and people have started coming back. Yes, there's still a disaffiliation rate, but we're actually getting baptisms that outweigh the funerals. It's not nothing. So the Catholic Church has a future, and that happened in large part because of Francis. And I don't know, he's been dead for a year, and there's not a lot else to say, but he did his best. He did his best for the church, and then he died. So I'm gonna go cry a little bit, and then I'll be back later. Okay, bye. Nerd Church out.